The spreadsheet said $50. Nothing dramatic, just a small, forgettable number sitting quietly between groceries and electricity. 5 years later, that same column was quietly producing over $10,000 a month. No lottery win, no viral business, no inheritance. Just a series of decisions so small, most people wouldn't even notice them happening. There's a certain type of person who doesn't look rich, even when they are. They still check prices at the supermarket. They still pause before buying something unnecessary. They still treat money like it's limited, even when it no longer is. A few years ago, I met someone like that. Let's call him Salman. He had a normal job, a normal salary, and a very abnormal level of consistency. Salman had a simple rule. Every week, he set aside $50, not when it was convenient, not when he felt like it. Every single week, without exception. At first, it didn't look like anything was happening. No big wins, no exciting milestones, just small, almost boring progress. But slowly, something changed. His money stopped disappearing and started behaving. Most people misunderstand what it takes to build real income. They think it requires a big starting point or some rare opportunity. But the truth is quieter than that. Wealth doesn't begin with large amounts. It begins with controlled behavior repeated over time. That $50 a week, it's not about the amount. It's about what it trains you to do. Because once you learn how to consistently direct a small amount of money, you're building the exact skill required to manage larger amounts later. The habit scales. The discipline compounds. And eventually, the money does too. $50 a week turns into $200 a month. That becomes $2,600 a year. On its own, it doesn't feel life-changing. But when you combine that with smart allocation, reinvestment, and patience, it starts behaving differently. It stops being static and starts becoming productive. And that's the real shift. You're no longer just saving money. You're planting small systems. Systems that, over time, begin to generate their own income. The goal isn't to reach $10,000 by saving harder. It's to build something that produces $10,000 without needing you to trade time for it every day. And that doesn't happen through one big decision. It happens through repeated, almost invisible habits. The kind that don't feel impressive in the moment, but quietly reshape your financial life over years. In the next part, we'll walk through the first set of habits that make this transformation possible. The first thing Salman changed wasn't how much he earned. It was how he treated small amounts of money. He stopped seeing $50 as too little to matter and started treating it like a seed with a job to do. That shift alone separates people who stay stuck from people who build momentum. The first habit is simple, but uncomfortable. You have to assign purpose to every small dollar before it disappears. Most people spend first and save what's left, which usually means nothing is left. Salman reversed that. Every week, the $50 was already decided before the week even began. It didn't sit in his account waiting to be spent. It had a destination. Sometimes it went into an index fund, sometimes into a small digital product experiment. But it was never idle. Over a year, that's $2,600 that didn't leak into random purchases. At an average return of 10%, that money starts compounding, not just financially, but mentally. The act of deciding in advance removes decision fatigue, and that's what most people are actually losing to. Not lack of money, but lack of clarity. The second habit feels slow at first, almost frustrating. He focused on buying income, not things. This doesn't mean he stopped spending completely. It means he started asking a different question. Will this pay me back? 1 month, instead of upgrading his phone, he used that weekly $50 to buy a simple online tool that helped him freelance on the side. It didn't generate much at first, maybe $30, then $80, then a few hundred. But that shift created a new feedback loop. Instead of money going out permanently, some of it started coming back. If even 20% of what you invest begins producing small returns, those returns can be reinvested. That's how $50 evolves, not through one big jump, but through layers of small income streams stacking over time. The third habit is where most people lose patience. He stayed consistent even when nothing exciting was happening. For nearly a year, the results were almost invisible. No big milestones, no dramatic increases, just steady contributions. This is where people quit, because the brain craves visible progress, but compounding doesn't reward impatience. It rewards endurance. If you invest $50 weekly with a modest return, the early years look flat. But around year 3 or 4, the curve begins to bend. That's because your returns start generating their own returns. It's subtle, but powerful. Psychologically, this phase builds trust. You stop relying on motivation and start relying on routine. The fourth habit is surprisingly practical. He reduced friction around saving and investing. Most people rely on willpower, which is unreliable. Salman automated everything. The $50 left his account the same day his income came in. No decisions, no hesitation. That one move removed the possibility of spending it elsewhere. Automation isn't just about convenience. It's about protecting yourself from your future impulses. Studies in behavioral finance show that when saving is automatic, participation rates increase dramatically, sometimes by over 50%. Not because people suddenly became disciplined, but because they removed the need to decide every time. The fifth habit is where things start to get interesting. He reinvested every small win. When his side income made $100, he didn't celebrate by spending it. He treated it like fuel. That $100 was split and redirected into things that could grow further: skills, tools, or investments. Over time, this creates a loop where your money is constantly being recycled into growth. Even a small side income of $200 a month, when fully reinvested, can double within a couple of years, depending on where it's allocated. This is how the system begins to accelerate, not because of luck, but because nothing is wasted. Each of these habits seems small in isolation: assigning purpose, buying income, staying consistent, automating, reinvesting. None of them feel like they could lead to $10,000 a month, but together, they start to shift how money behaves in your life. You stop being someone who reacts to money and start becoming someone who directs it. And that's where the real change begins. By the time most people notice progress, the foundation has already been built quietly in the background. That's exactly where the next set of habits begins, when things start to feel slightly different, but not yet dramatic. Salman didn't suddenly earn more and then decide to be disciplined. He flipped that order. The sixth habit was increasing contribution only when income increased, not lifestyle. This is where most people unintentionally sabotage themselves. A small raise comes in, and almost instantly expenses rise to match it. Better food, more subscriptions, slightly more comfort. It feels harmless, even deserved. But Salman treated every increase in income as an opportunity to widen the gap between what he earns and what he spends. When his income went up by $200 a month, he didn't absorb it into his lifestyle. He redirected most of it into the same systems he had already built. Over time, that gap becomes powerful. If your income grows by even 5 to 10% annually, but your expenses stay relatively stable, the surplus compounds aggressively. Psychologically, this builds a sense of control. You stop feeling like money flows through you and start feeling like it accumulates around you. The seventh habit was learning to tolerate delayed gratification without feeling deprived. This is subtle, but critical. Most people associate discipline with restriction, which makes it emotionally exhausting. Salman reframed it. He didn't feel like he was missing out. He felt like he was choosing a different timeline. Instead of immediate upgrades, he chose future income. There's a well-known concept in behavioral science called temporal discounting, the tendency to value immediate rewards more than future ones. This is why buying something today feels more satisfying than investing for years ahead. But once you consciously override that tendency, even in small ways, you start changing how you perceive time itself. Waiting stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like strategy. The eighth habit was building micro-income streams instead of chasing one big breakthrough. This is where the idea of $10,000 a month starts to make sense. It rarely comes from one source. Instead, it's a collection of smaller streams layered together. Salman experimented constantly. One month, it was a small freelance service. Another month, it was a digital template. Some things failed, some made $20, a few grew into a few hundred. Over time, those small streams stacked. 5 streams making $200 each becomes $1,000. 10 streams at $500 each becomes $5,000. The math isn't complicated, but the patience required is. The key insight here is diversification, not just for safety, but for opportunity. When you have multiple streams, one successful idea can scale without risking everything else. The ninth habit was protecting attention as if it were money. This might sound unrelated, but it's deeply connected. The ability to grow $50 into something meaningful depends on where your focus goes. Salman avoided constant distraction, endless scrolling, impulsive browsing, unnecessary comparison. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Because attention determines decisions, and decisions determine outcomes. Research consistently shows that people exposed to constant advertising and social comparison tend to spend more impulsively. By reducing that exposure, he reduced unnecessary spending triggers. This created mental space to think long-term. And long-term thinking is where wealth is actually built, The 10th habit was reviewing progress without emotional overreaction. This is where many people derail. A bad month feels like failure. A small gain feels insignificant. Salman treated both as data. Every few months, he would review where his money went, what worked and what didn't. No guilt, no excitement, just adjustment. This neutral approach prevented him from making impulsive decisions. If an investment dipped, he didn't panic. If something worked, he didn't assume it would last forever. This kind of emotional stability is rare, but it's what allows compounding to continue uninterrupted. Now, if you step back, none of these habits are extreme. They don't require genius, luck, or a high starting income. What they require is a shift in how you interact with money, time, and yourself. But here's the part that makes this difficult. Most people already understand these ideas, at least intellectually. They know they should save. They know they should invest. They know they shouldn't overspend. And yet, they don't follow through consistently. Not because they're lazy, not because they're incapable, but because the real challenge isn't knowledge, it's psychology. In the next part, we're going to explore why people struggle with money even when they know exactly what to do, and how those invisible forces quietly shape every financial decision. What makes this difficult isn't a lack of information, it's that money decisions are rarely logical in the moment they're made. They're emotional, social, and often automatic. Take lifestyle inflation. It doesn't feel like a mistake when it's happening. It feels like progress. You earn a little more, so you upgrade slightly. Better meals, a more comfortable apartment, maybe a few extra subscriptions that make life easier. None of it seems excessive on its own, but over time, your expenses quietly rise to match your income. The gap that could have been invested disappears, and because each upgrade feels justified, you never notice the long-term cost. Salman avoided this, not by living extremely, but by keeping his baseline stable even as his income grew. That single decision preserved the space where wealth could actually accumulate. Then there's social comparison, which is far more powerful than most people admit. You might be perfectly content with what you have, until you see what someone else has. A colleague upgrades their car, a friend travels more frequently, someone your age seems to be moving faster financially. Suddenly, your own progress feels insufficient. This isn't about greed, it's about perception. Studies in behavioral psychology show that people evaluate their success relative to others, not in absolute terms. That's why someone earning a good income can still feel behind. And when that feeling takes over, spending becomes a way to close the emotional gap, even if it widens the financial one. Instant gratification plays a quieter but constant role. The brain is wired to prioritize immediate rewards. That's why a small purchase today feels more satisfying than a larger benefit months or years later. It's not a lack of discipline, it's biology. Every time you choose to spend instead of invest, you're not just making a financial decision, you're responding to a deeply ingrained preference for immediacy. Salman didn't eliminate this tendency, he worked around it. He allowed small, controlled spending, but protected the core habit of investing first. That balance made the system sustainable. Marketing influence is another invisible force shaping decisions. Every day you're exposed to messages designed to make spending feel necessary. Limited time offers, discounts that create urgency. Products framed as solutions to problems you didn't know you had. Over time, this creates a constant sense of almost needing something. And when your environment is filled with these signals, resisting them requires effort. Reducing exposure, unsubscribing from promotional emails, limiting time on certain platforms, doesn't just save money. It reduces the number of decisions you have to fight. FOMO, or the fear of missing out, amplifies all of this. It's not just about missing experiences, it's about feeling left behind. When everyone seems to be upgrading their lives in real time, staying disciplined can feel like you're standing still. But what's often invisible is the financial trade-off behind those visible moments. People rarely show the cost of their choices, only the outcome. Salman understood that missing out in the short term was part of building something larger. He wasn't avoiding experiences entirely, he was choosing them more deliberately. And then there's convenience spending, which has become almost effortless. A few taps, and something arrives at your door. Food, clothes, gadgets, it's all frictionless. That ease removes the natural pause that used to exist before spending. You don't have to think as much, so you don't. Individually, these purchases seem small, but over time, they add up in a way that's hard to track emotionally. Salman introduced small barriers, waiting a day before buying, reviewing his spending weekly, not to restrict himself, but to reintroduce awareness. When you combine all of these forces, lifestyle inflation, comparison, instant gratification, marketing, FOMO, and convenience, you start to see why building wealth feels harder than it should. It's not just about earning and saving. It's about navigating an environment that constantly pulls you in the opposite direction. That's why the $50 habit matters so much. It's not just a financial action, it's a psychological anchor, a consistent decision that remains steady even when everything around you is designed to disrupt it. Because in the end, building $10,000 a month isn't about one big breakthrough. It's about maintaining small, correct behaviors in a world that rewards the opposite. In the final part, we'll bring this down to something practical. Simple steps you can start using immediately to build your own system without overcomplicating it. The most powerful change you can make is deceptively simple. Automate the habits you want to stick. Set up your $50 or whatever amount you choose to move automatically from your checking account into investments, savings, or small income generating projects. You don't rely on memory, willpower, or motivation. You just let the system work quietly in the background. Even a small automation removes the single biggest obstacle most people face: human inconsistency. Next, create spending rules that protect your progress without feeling restrictive. For example, allow yourself one indulgence a week, but everything else is intentional. When your money is governed by rules rather than impulses, you stop reacting to every marketing signal, every social post, every limited time offer. You're no longer a participant in the economy of temptation. You're a director of your own financial story. Another step is managing lifestyle inflation. Every time your income grows, ask, will this increase my wealth or just my spending? Direct the surplus toward income-producing avenues first, and treat lifestyle upgrades as secondary. This creates a widening gap between what you earn and what you spend, and that gap is the engine that turns small weekly contributions into a large monthly income. Habit-based budgeting is also essential. Instead of tracking every line item obsessively, anchor your finances around key behaviors: saving first, investing consistently, and redirecting side income. This approach reduces friction, keeps you consistent, and prevents small distractions from undermining years of progress. Even a simple habit like invest every Friday or review income streams every month compounds in effect over time. Finally, focus on small daily behaviors that reinforce long-term outcomes. Choosing tap water over soda, cooking at home once or twice a week, delaying non-essential purchases for 24 hours. Each seems insignificant alone, but collectively they free resources and strengthen the mental discipline needed to grow wealth. The real magic isn't in a single big decision. It's in 1,000 tiny ones repeated consistently. By combining these practical steps, automation, spending rules, lifestyle discipline, habit-based budgeting, and tiny daily choices, you build a system that works while you sleep. That $50 a week transforms from a simple expense into the foundation of multiple income streams, steadily compounding until it reaches amounts you once thought impossible. And here's the quiet philosophical truth behind it all. Wealth isn't about the money itself. It's about the choices you make in the spaces where no one is watching. It's about the unseen consistency, the patience to defer gratification, and the courage to act against immediate impulses. When you master that, the numbers are inevitable. So, the next time you see a small $50 in your weekly budget, don't shrug it off. Treat it like the seed it is. Nurture it with intention. Protect it from distraction. Let it grow quietly. 5 years from now, you may not recognize how far it has taken you, not because it was dramatic, but because real wealth often builds in silence. This is how ordinary people create extraordinary financial outcomes. Not by luck, not by genius, but by repeatedly doing the right small things when no one is looking.